The rain tapped a steady rhythm against my window, sliding down in thin streaks that blurred the Seattle skyline in the distance. I sat cross-legged on my old sofa, hugging a throw pillow that had lost its shape years ago. On the coffee table in front of me sat a single chocolate cupcake. The frosting had already hardened a little from waiting too long, and one small candle leaned slightly to the side, unlit, untouched, almost mocking me. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. 30 years old. A milestone birthday, the kind people talk about as a turning point, a chapter that deserves celebration. My friends were posting pictures of dinners with family vacations with their spouses or gatherings full of laughter. Me, I had a cupcake and a quiet apartment. I wondered if anyone else in the world was blowing out their own candle alone tonight. I glanced up at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked with that soft, deliberate sound, each movement pushing time forward whether I wanted it or not. Then came the hour. 8 o'clock. The day was officially over, and not a single call had come. Not one text, not even a lazy happy birthday from the people who brought me into this world. Inside my chest, something deflated like a balloon slowly losing air. For the 15th time that evening, I picked up my phone, hoping the screen would finally light up with something. It didn't. Just the same blank reflection of my own tired face. I let out a small laugh, bitter at myself. Emery, after all these years, you still wait for them, don't you? My thumb slid across the screen and opened Instagram. I knew it would hurt, but I did it anyway. There it was, the newest post from Camille, my younger sister. She sat at the piano in a long, flowing dress, her fingers just above the keys, her smile as bright as a spotlight. 78 likes already, and climbing fast. The first comment stopped me cold. Mom had written, "Our brilliant star. We couldn't be prouder of your performance last night." Right below it, Dad added, "That's my girl. Mozart himself would be jealous." I stared at the words until my throat tightened. 30 years of the same script, and it still pierced me like the first time. Camille the star and me the shadow applauding from the wings. I set the phone down and covered my eyes with my palm, fighting back tears. It was foolish to expect anything different, but the sting never dulled. Memories began to creep in uninvited. I saw myself at 10 years old, sitting in the living room wearing a pink dress my grandmother had mailed from out of state. My hair had been brushed smooth, a small gift balanced on my lap. I waited smiling, certain there would be a party just for me. Then Mom's voice rang from the hallway. "Hurry, we can't be late for Camille's recital." My heart sank. I whispered, "But what about my party?" Dad only patted my head and said, "We'll celebrate next weekend, kiddo." We never did. That was the day I learned to fade into the background. Now here I was, 30 years old, staring at another forgotten birthday. The little cupcake hadn't moved. Neither had I. My hand reached for the candle lighter, then stopped halfway. What exactly would I be celebrating? Another year of invisibility, another year of being left behind while someone else shined. I dropped my hand and leaned back against the sofa. The apartment was still except for the rain outside, steady and unbothered. Time didn't wait for me, and neither did my family. The silence pressed in on me, heavy and absolute. Then from somewhere deep inside, an idea stirred a small flicker, like a match catching flame. If they'll never celebrate me, I thought then I'll celebrate myself. The thought seemed reckless, at first even childish, but the longer I sat with it, the warmer it grew. For the first time that entire day, my shoulders straightened. I took a long breath, and a hint of a smile touched my lips. The rain hadn't stopped, but something inside me had shifted. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. It's strange how memories rise when you least expect them. Sitting in that dim apartment with the rain still pressing against the glass, I felt myself slip backward in time, back to a little girl who had not yet learned to expect disappointment. I was 10 years old. My grandmother had sent me a pink dress with a lace collar, and I wore it proudly, twirling in front of the mirror. On my lap rested the small gift she had mailed, wrapped neatly in floral paper, with my name written in her careful cursive. I waited in the living room, cheeks flushed with excitement, sure my family would soon gather around to sing. But instead, I heard Mom's hurried footsteps. She swept through, clutching Camille's sheet music. "Come on, Emery, we can't be late for your sister's recital." I remember my voice soft and uncertain. But what about my party? Dad, already buttoning his jacket, barely looked at me. He patted my head absently. "We'll celebrate next weekend, kiddo." Next weekend never came. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the uneaten cake my grandmother had shipped, along with my dress. By the time Camille's recital trophies arrived, everyone had forgotten. Everyone except me. That was the first lesson, don't expect too much. At 16, the pattern repeated itself. I had hoped for a birthday with friends, maybe a dinner out, something to mark the step between childhood and adulthood. Instead, there was a store-bought cake, barely iced, plopped onto the table as an afterthought. Camille, meanwhile, was given a lavish celebration for her 15th catered food music, 50 guests packed into the backyard. I smiled through it, clapped loudly for her, and told myself not to mind. But I did mind. The hurt sank into my bones. At 20, it happened again, though, in a way that still leaves a bruise when I think about it. My birthday fell near Camille's college graduation. The family planned a big trip to celebrate her achievement, plane tickets. Hotel bookings, the works. There wasn't enough room in the budget or the schedule for both. Someone needed to stay home, they said. Keep an eye on the house, collect the mail. That someone, of course, was me. I spent that birthday alone, eating leftovers from the fridge, scrolling through photos they sent from Florida, smiling on the beach, Camille in her cap and gown. They never noticed the date. I never mentioned it. That was the second lesson. If you speak up, you'll only sound ungrateful. And so the years rolled on. 25, 27, 29, none of them marked, none of them acknowledged. The days bled into one another, and if it weren't for my own quiet rituals, a cupcake, a whispered wish before bed, I might have forgotten them too. But no matter how old you get, some part of you still longs to be seen by the people who matter most. I sometimes wonder if my parents even realize what they've done, if to them birthdays are trivial things easily overlooked in the rush of daily life. Perhaps they truly believed they were being fair after all. I was the responsible one, the daughter who didn't need fuss or attention. Camille was the artist, the prodigy, the one who needed encouragement. That's how they justified it, I think. But children, even grown ones, don't remember justifications. We remember the empty chairs at our parties, the silence on our special days, the feeling of being invisible in our own homes. Sitting there on my 30th, staring at that single cupcake, I realized it wasn't just this day I was mourning. It was every day like it that had come before. 30 years of invisibility compacted into one silent night. The truth settled over me they would never change on their own. Why would they? Camille still played her concerts, still received their applause. Mom still posted glowing tributes. Dad still bragged about her to anyone who would listen. Their attention had always been a current flowing in one direction, and I was simply outside the stream. That was when another thought took root, a fragile but insistent one. What if I stopped waiting? What if I stopped hoping they'd remember and simply celebrated myself instead? It felt radical, almost rebellious. For decades I had defined my worth in contrast to their neglect. But maybe, just maybe, I could choose a different definition. The rain outside softened, falling in gentler patterns against the window. I closed my eyes, listening. I thought of that 10-year-old girl in the pink dress waiting for a party that never came. I thought of the 16-year-old who smiled bravely over a grocery store cake, of the 20-year-old left behind while the rest of the family cheered on the golden child. And then I thought of the woman I had become, 30 years old, with a steady career, a successful hotel project under my belt, and a bonus large enough to buy the car I'd once only dreamed about. For the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe I didn't need them to clap for me. Maybe it was enough to clap for myself. That realization was quiet, almost tender. But it carried the weight of decades. I opened my eyes, looked at the cupcake one last time, and felt a new determination stir inside me. The pattern might stretch back 30 years, but it didn't have to define the next 30. The rain outside softened, no longer harsh, but steady, like a metronome keeping time for the thoughts running through my head. I pushed the cupcake aside and opened my laptop. The screen lit up the dim apartment numbers filling the quiet. I had always been careful with money, not because anyone taught me, but because no one ever asked. Saving became my way of creating a safety net, something solid I could trust when people proved unreliable. The balance blinked back at me just over $97,000. Months of long nights on design projects and the generous bonus from the Fairmont Hotel redesign had given me more than I ever thought possible. I thought of that project, the warm brass railings, the soft amber lighting, the way the lobby invited guests to linger. I had poured myself into it. They gave me an award, colleagues shook my hand, but at home, silence. No one called to ask how it went. No one cared. That bonus sat in my account like a secret medal pinned to my chest where only I could see it. My finger hovered over the calculator. Slowly, I mapped it out like a floor plan car price down payment monthly finance. I wasn't reckless. $22,000 down would keep me safe, and a reasonable loan would leave plenty for savings. I added insurance registration, even the cost of renting a secure garage space downstairs, so I wouldn't have to leave a new car out on the street. Line by line, the plan made sense. For the first time that day, my lungs felt open. My eyes drifted to my phone. I had looked at Seattle Audi's number before only to close it quickly, convincing myself it was too much, too indulgent. But tonight was different. Tonight, indulgence felt less like vanity and more like survival. I pressed call. Seattle Audi, this is Trevor speaking. How may I help you? The man's voice was calm, professional. Hi, I said, surprised at the steadiness in my own tone. My name is Emery. I'm interested in a Q5 something in deep blue if you have it. We do, he replied after a pause. Midnight blue, in fact. Are you hoping to come by for a test drive? I looked at the cupcake, the rain streaking down the glass, the empty silence of my apartment. Actually, I said I'm hoping to buy one, tonight. There was a beat of quiet on the other end. Well, he said finally, we're open for another hour. If you're serious, I'll get it ready. I'm serious, I told him. And I meant it. When the call ended, I caught my reflection in the window. My shoulders were pulled back, my chin lifted. I almost didn't recognize myself, this version of Emery, who no longer asked permission, who didn't wait to be remembered. I grabbed my coat keys and the small cupcake, carrying it like a reminder of what I was leaving behind. Downstairs, the damp air smelled of wet cedar. I drove my old car through streets still slick from the storm. The dealership shone like a beacon, its glass walls reflecting rows of cars polished to perfection. Inside, a man in a crisp shirt approached, his smile, rehearsed but not unkind. Emery, he asked. Yes, I answered. Trevor. He led me across the bright showroom, and then I saw it, the midnight blue Q5, sleek, understated, powerful in its quiet way. I ran my fingers just above the glossy paint, feeling the possibility radiate from it. We took a short drive. The engine purred steady and smooth, nothing showy. It felt less like buying luxury and more like finding a companion, something reliable that matched the woman I had become. Back at the dealership, the paperwork began. No drama, no hesitation. I laid out the numbers I had planned, down payment, financing terms, insurance proof. For once, I spoke with quiet authority, not apology. Congratulations, the finance manager said at the end, sliding the keys toward me. The key fob felt heavy in my palm, solid, real mine. I walked outside to where the car waited under the lights, rain still glistening on its hood. I placed the cupcake on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel. The leather was cool beneath my hands. For a moment, I just listened to the silence, letting it wrap around me. Then I started the engine. The hum filled the night, low and steady like the sound of a heartbeat. Driving out of the lot, I didn't feel reckless. I didn't feel extravagant. I felt seen by myself at last. Under the showroom lights, the midnight blue looked almost black quiet and composed, like something that didn't need to announce itself. Trevor offered to take a delivery photo, but I shook my head. Some moments shouldn't be flattened into a frame. I wanted this one to live in motion, not pixels. We did the practical walk-around. He pointed out the clean panel lines, the solid door, closed the little details you only notice when you aren't trying to impress anyone, how the steering adjusted in fine steps, how the driver aids could be dialed back to simple nudges instead of constant chatter. He paired my phone, showed me the backup camera and the fuel door release, then stepped away as if he sensed I needed a little space for a private ceremony. "Take your time," he said. "I'll be inside." I opened the door and slid in. The seat found me, not the other way around. I rested both hands on the wheel and let the quiet gather. When I pressed the start button, the engine came alive without drawing attention to itself. I set the wipers to a lazy sweep and watched them clear the mist, the small, ordinary grace of a tool doing exactly what it should. We eased out from under the portico. I took a short loop, a side street with a gentle curve, a pair of lights, a stretch of road with expansion joints that used to rattle my old car. The Q5 flowed without bravado. The steering felt honest. The cabin felt like a room with the door just barely closed enough to keep out the draft, not enough to shut out the world. I didn't want speed. I wanted steadiness. This was that. Back inside the rest was signatures and initials. Numbers I had already rehearsed at my kitchen table, a careful down payment, a sensible term, proof of insurance, a note about the secure garage space downstairs. I asked what I needed to ask. No apology in my voice, no performance either. "Congratulations, Ms." Blake, the finance manager, said, sliding the key fob toward me. It was heavier than I expected, cool and certain in my palm. Trevor walked me to the car, then paused. "Do you need anything else?" "I think I'm good," I said. And I was. Outside, the rain had softened to a breath. I fetched the cupcake from my old car and set it on the new passenger side mat, a small, slightly ridiculous co-pilot. I smiled at myself and exhaled. The garage door rose. Headlights traced a pale arc. The city opened like a page I'd finally decided to turn. I took the long way past the hardware store with its half-lit sign and the diner that closes early but leaves the coffee on for the owner's son. Seattle smelled rinsed, the cedar and concrete, both brighter after rain. A song from my college studio nights came on the radio, one I had outgrown and somehow hadn't. I let it play. I didn't sing. I didn't have to. The quiet between the notes felt like mine. Red light. I rested my wrist on the wheel and felt the car's calm waiting. Green. We moved forward together, not a leap, just a sure step. I thought about taking a photo, right then dashboard glow raindrops, jeweled on glass, but decided against it. The impulse to prove something had finally blessedly passed. When I turned into my building's garage, the keypad blinked green. The gate lifted slow and unhurried. I guided the Q5 into the space I'd arranged earlier, the one under a camera bordered by a column, so no one could swing a door into mine. Park, brake, engine off. The silence that followed felt full rather than empty, like a pause in a conversation that didn't need rescuing. I stayed seated a moment longer with my hands resting on the wheel, offering a private thank you to all the earlier versions of me who got me here. The 10-year-old in the pink dress, the 16-year-old with the grocery store cake, the 20-year-old collecting the mail while everyone else celebrated elsewhere. I pictured them climbing into this driver's seat, seeing what I saw, feeling what I felt, not triumph exactly, something quieter and sturdier. Permission. Upstairs, my apartment was exactly as I'd left it, a cup by the sink, a book face down on the arm of the sofa, the twin cupcake waiting on the table with its stubborn unlit candle. I set tonight's cupcake beside it, two small, imperfect circles of chocolate, and didn't light either one. The day had already been marked by ink, by metal, by the soft thud of a door closing well. I washed my hands, changed into a warm sweater, and stood at the window. Down below, the garage swallowed the last of its echo. I could almost see the curve of midnight blue at rest where I had left it. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I let it be. For 30 years I had bent toward other people's timing. Tonight, I let time bend a little toward me. "Happy birthday," I told my reflection, and the words didn't sound like a consolation prize. They sounded true. I didn't drive straight home. The streets were open after the storm, and the air carried that clean, metallic scent that comes only once the rain has scrubbed a city raw. My hands rested lightly on the wheel, savoring the quiet hum of the engine. Seattle has always been a city of overlooks, tiny corners where the skyline reveals itself like a secret. Cary Park was the one I had loved most as a child, though back then it was mostly Camille who got to pose there in recital dresses, while my parents fussed with their camera. Tonight I pulled up on my own terms. I parked the Audi at just the right angle, letting the midnight blue catch the glow of the Space Needle. I walked around it slowly, breathing in the mixture of wet pavement and the faint leather smell that clung to me from the cabin. For once there was no rush. I was the only audience, and that felt exactly right. I pulled out my phone and lined up the shot the car against the skyline city lights dancing across its glossy surface. The photo was beautiful, but I hesitated. The caption mattered. My thumbs hovered, typing and erasing, starting again. Finally, I wrote "Happy Birthday" to me. Dream car, dream life. Not a plea for attention, not a jab at anyone, just a statement. I pressed post before I could second-guess myself. The response was immediate. Notifications popped up like sparks. Wow! Emery, gorgeous car. Happy birthday. You deserve it. Didn't know you were in the market for an Audi colleague's old classmates, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Chimed in. Their joy felt genuine. Their words wrapped around me like the warm applause I had longed for at home but never received. For a few minutes, I let myself bask in it, my screen glowing with hearts and comments. But then the phone buzzed in a different rhythm. My chest tightened when I saw the name. Mom. I answered slowly. Hello, Mom. Her first words weren't "Happy birthday" or "How are you?" They were clipped, suspicious. Emery Jean Blake. Where did you get that kind of money? The familiar sting pressed at my ribs. Hello to you too, I said, leaning against the car for support. I earned it. That car costs more than some people make in a year. Harold, come talk to your daughter. I heard the rustle as the phone changed hands. Dad's voice came stern, the same tone he used when I broke curfew at 16. Emery, is this a lease arrangement? Because financially this seems reckless. It's mine, I said evenly, mostly paid in cash, from the Fairmont project bonus. I let the words hang. For once, I wanted them to hear the weight of my accomplishments. Silence. I imagined Dad calculating, adjusting his mental image of me. Well, he muttered finally, that seems impulsive. Another buzz vibrated my hand, this time a preview from Camille. Wow. Didn't think you could afford something like that. Mom and Dad freaking out, LOL. Seconds later, the family group chat exploded. Why would you spend like this? We need to talk. This isn't like you. Not one message said, Happy birthday. Mom's voice returned on the line, firmer now. We need to discuss this as a family. Dinner, tomorrow night, 6 o'clock sharp. Her tone was more summons than invitation. For a moment I thought about refusing, but something in me, the same calm that had carried me through the showroom, spoke first. Fine, I said, but I'll be driving myself. When the call ended, I slipped into the driver's seat and shut the door. The cabin was hushed again, only the gentle tap of rain beginning to return. I rested my hands on the wheel. Tomorrow would be a confrontation, I knew, but tonight was still mine. I started the engine and let the car idle. The city spread out below me, lights shimmering across the bay. I whispered it aloud so softly the words nearly disappeared into the hum of the car. Happy birthday, Emery. From me to me. The rain had faded to mist by the time I pulled into the garage that night. I sat for a long while in the driver's seat, letting the silence settle around me. Mom's voice still rang in my ears. We need to talk about this as a family. Dinner, tomorrow night, 6 o'clock sharp. It felt less like an invitation and more like a court summons. Upstairs, my apartment looked the same as always, lamplight glowing soft, a cup on the counter, the faint hum of the fridge. But something inside me had shifted. I set my keys down and flipped my phone face down to quiet the stream of notifications. Friends and colleagues filled the screen with congratulations. The family thread, meanwhile, was buzzing with suspicion. Not a single happy birthday among the messages. I ran a bath and sank into the hot water, trying to let the heat wash the tension from my body. Numbers drifted through my head down payment insurance garage space, nothing reckless about what I had done. But old habits tugged at me, the urge to defend myself, even when there was nothing to defend. Later, wrapped in a towel, I finally glanced at my phone. A text from Camille blinked. "You okay? Mom's just being intense. You know how she is." I stared at her words, as if intense explained 3 decades of forgetting. I typed back, "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." After a pause, she added, "The car is a lot. Also, happy birthday. Sorry I didn't say it earlier." It was late, but I wasn't ready to sleep. A thought came clear as glass. If they wouldn't mark my birthday, I would. I grabbed my keys, went back downstairs, and drove toward Pike Place. A bakery's lights still glowed, though closing time was near. "You just made it," the woman behind the counter said. "I need a small chocolate cake," I told her. "Buttercream frosting." She asked if I wanted a message written. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. Happy birthday, Emery. From me to me." She didn't question it, just smiled kindly as she wrote the words in neat blue script. When she handed me the box, I felt a strange kind of peace. Back at home, I slid the cake onto my fridge shelf. Tomorrow, I would place it on my parents' polished dining table, under the chandelier they reserved for important occasions, and for once, the occasion would be mine. The next day moved slowly, almost deliberately. I folded laundry, answered a client email, walked along the water. When Mom called again to remind me, I let it ring out. Her voicemail was firm. "Please be on time. We need to talk about your decision." My decision. The words made me smile. At 4:30, I dressed simply: dark slacks, a cream blouse, a soft cardigan. Nothing dramatic, nothing to defend. I carried the cake to the car and buckled it into the passenger seat. The drive across the bridge was calm, the lake lying flat under a pale sky. As Bellevue's neat streets came into view, I felt the familiar childhood flutter in my chest, the old fear of not measuring up. But I wasn't 10 anymore. I wasn't waiting in a pink dress for a party that never came. Their house stood the same as always, porch light already burning. I parked beside Dad's sedan. Through the wide window, I saw their silhouettes move and pause as though they were rehearsing. I turned off the engine, rested both hands on the wheel, and drew a steady breath. Then I lifted the cake box, opened the door, and stepped onto the gravel drive. Each crunch under my shoes sounded like punctuation marking the end of silence. Before I reached the porch, the door opened. Mom stood there, her perfume drifting into the evening air, her smile tight at the edges. "Emery," she said, "you made good time." I lifted the box slightly so she could see. "I brought dessert," I replied. And for the first time in years, the words felt like mine alone. The dining room looked exactly as I remembered. It polished maple table crystal glasses catching the chandelier's glow, the good china reserved for Camille's milestones. My cake box felt almost heavy in my hands as I stepped inside. Dad stood with his arms crossed, eyeing the Audi through the bay window. "That's quite a vehicle you've got there," he said. His tone landed somewhere between admiration and reproach. "Yes," I replied simply. I didn't elaborate. The car could speak for itself. Camille hovered nearby, half smiling, half anxious. "Nice car, Em," she offered, as though trying to smooth the air before the first cut of tension. Mom busied herself with pot roast, the same dish she always cooked for family meetings. She poured red wine for herself and Dad, then glanced at me. "Merlot." "Just water, thanks," I said. My voice sounded calm even to my own ears. I wanted a clear head. We sat. Forks scraped against plates. Small talk filled the edges of silence, whether the neighbors remodel Camille's next recital. Not once did anyone mention the day I was born 30 years ago to the night before. Finally, Dad leaned forward, eyes on me. "That car must have set you back quite a bit. Financing is a trap these days. Dealers will say anything to get you to sign." I took a sip of water. No financing needed for most of it. The room fell quiet. Mom's fork paused midair. Camille shifted in her seat. Dad cleared his throat, stabbed a carrot, and muttered, "You should be putting money into retirement, not depreciating assets." It was the same tone I had heard my entire life at college, when I chose architecture, when I rented my first apartment, when I took jobs he thought were unstable. It was dismissal disguised as wisdom. I let the words wash over me, then set my fork down. Slowly, I rose and walked to the sideboard. I brought back the cake box, placed it in the center of the table, and lifted the lid. The script on the frosting glowed under the chandelier. "Happy birthday, Emery. From me to me." Mom gasped softly, her hand rising to her mouth. Camille's eyes widened. Dad shifted uncomfortable. My voice was steadier than I expected. For 30 years, my birthdays have been forgotten while Camille's were celebrated like royalty. My 16th birthday, a grocery store cake, hers, 50 guests and a caterer. My 20th. You left me behind to watch the house while you vacationed after her graduation. And last night, not a single text. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to. Intention isn't the point, I interrupted gently. It's about 30 years of consistent choices. And this year I decided not to wait anymore. I gestured to the cake, so I gave myself the gift I deserved. Silence pressed down like a physical weight. Only the grandfather clock ticked in the corner, marking every second of uncomfortable truth. Camille spoke first, her voice hesitant. I never realized. I was so wrapped up in my own recitals, my concerts. I should have seen how it felt for you." "Yes, you should have," I said, not unkindly but firmly. "But you weren't the architect of this family dynamic. You just benefited from it." Dad's voice broke the silence. "Emery families are complicated. We've always been proud of you." I looked him straight in the eye. "When was the last time you came to one of my design showcases? When did you ever put a photo of my work on the mantle beside Camille's programs? When did you introduce me first instead of as an afterthought?" He had no answer. Mom dabbed at her cheeks with a napkin. "We never wanted you to feel invisible. I know I said. But that's how it was. And now I won't live that way anymore. I value myself whether anyone else does or not." I closed the cake box, slid it toward the center. "Consider it my birthday gift to all of you. A reminder." The room stayed hushed, no arguments left. I rose from my chair, lifted my purse, and stood taller than I had in years. The chandelier light caught the edge of the box as I walked out. Behind me, no one spoke. Ahead of me, the night air was cool, and my Audi waited like a steady friend. The night air cooled my skin as I stepped out of my parents' house cake box, left behind like a quiet bomb on their polished table. My Audi waited in the driveway, its midnight blue surface reflecting the porch light. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and for the first time all evening, the silence belonged to me. Hands on the wheel, I replayed the moment, their stunned faces, as they read the cake's inscription, the way Dad's words faltered, the tears streaming down Mom's cheeks. For 30 years, I had swallowed those feelings, waiting for them to remember me. Tonight, I had finally spoken not in anger, but in clarity. My voice hadn't trembled. Not once. I started the engine, the steady hum filling the night, and drove toward downtown. The road shimmered with scattered rain. Each mile loosened the tightness in my chest until breathing felt easy again. In the quiet cabin, I whispered the words that had carried me here. I value myself. I celebrate myself. Saying it aloud was like planting a flag in soil no one else had touched. The city lights spread out as I crossed the bridge. To my left, the Space Needle glowed like a sentinel against the night sky. I remembered being a little girl, forehead pressed to the car window as we drove past it on the way to Camille's concerts. I had stared up wishing someone would notice me. Tonight it felt different, like a beacon reminding me that visibility sometimes has to be claimed. When I pulled up outside my apartment building, I sat in the car a few minutes longer, letting the day replay in fragments. Mom's brittle smile at the door, Dad's lecture about finances, Camille's startled apology, and then me standing straighter than I ever had, saying the words that had been stuck in my throat for decades. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Messages from friends and colleagues continued to scroll in. "Congratulations. Emery, that car is gorgeous. Happy birthday. You deserve it." The outpouring felt like balm. But even more, it felt like proof that recognition wasn't something only my family could give. The world outside these walls saw me, even if the people inside my childhood home never had. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "We never meant to hurt you. Please understand. We love both our girls equally." I set it down without replying. Intentions were easy. Patterns told the truth. A message from Dad followed short and stiff family unity matters. Don't let this create a divide. As if 30 years of being invisible was a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes, let the irritation pass, and chose silence. For once, silence was my decision, not theirs. Then came a softer ping. Camille, can we meet tomorrow, just us? Coffee at Elm Street, 10 a.m. I stared at the message, surprised. In all our adult years, Camille had never asked to meet me alone. She had always been the one in the spotlight, and I the one clapping from the shadows. Something about her request felt different. My thumb hovered, then typed back, "I'll be there." I finished my wine and stood before the mirror. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Chin higher, shoulders squared, eyes steady. I traced the outline of my face, whispering, "You did it." The declaration had not been for them. Not really. It had been for me. Later in bed, the rain began again, tapping lightly against the window. It no longer sounded like loneliness. It sounded like applause. The morning broke gray and cool fog drifting low over Elliott Bay. I arrived at the Elm Street Cafe 10 minutes early, choosing a table by the window where I could watch the street. The smell of roasted beans wrapped around me, warm and familiar. My hands circled the mug I had ordered, letting the heat steady me. At 10:05, Camille appeared in the doorway. Even in casual clothes, she carried herself with that concert pianist posture, straight back, chin lifted. But when her eyes met mine, something shifted. She looked nervous. I hadn't seen that expression on her face in years. I stood halfway as she approached. "I got you a latte," I said. "Thanks," she murmured, sliding into the chair across from me. She wrapped both hands around the cup, but didn't sip. Her eyes were glossy, and to my shock, they brimmed with tears. Her voice cracked. She took a shaky breath. "I'm so sorry." I froze. In 30 years, I had heard apologies from teachers, co-workers, even strangers who bumped me on the street, but not once from my own sister. "Sorry," I repeated softly. "For everything," she whispered. "For not seeing, for not noticing you all those years." I stayed quiet, letting her words unfold. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling anyway. "I thought you were fine." "Honestly, I did. You were always there at my recitals, cheering louder than anyone. I thought you didn't mind being quieter." She winced at the word. But now I realize I let myself believe that because it was easier than asking how you felt. I stared into my coffee, the dark liquid trembling slightly from the pressure of my hand. "Do you know what it felt like?" I asked at last. "To sit at home on my birthday while you were celebrated on a stage, to open Instagram and see Mom calling you her brilliant star while forgetting my existence entirely." Camille bowed her head. "I know now, and it kills me." The cafe clatter filled the silence between us, cups clinking the hiss of steamed milk. I studied her face, searching for the polished confidence she always wore, but instead I saw something raw. Vulnerability, regret. She reached across the table, hesitated, then rested her hand near mine. "I can't change what Mom and Dad did. I can't undo all those years. But I can't admit I was selfish. I never once stood up for you. Not when they forgot your high school party, not when they left you home during my graduation trip, not even last night." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "I should have said something. I should have told them, this isn't right. But I didn't, and I'm sorry." The words landed heavier than I expected. My throat tightened. After so many years of invisibility, hearing her name, my pain out loud felt like someone had cracked open a sealed room. "I believed you didn't notice," I said quietly, "that you were too wrapped up in your world to see me at all." "I noticed," she whispered, "but I looked away. That's the truth." We sat there silent, stretching, not hostile, but fragile. For the first time, I saw my sister not as the star, but as another person caught in the family's orbit. Finally, I exhaled. "You're not the architect of this family dynamic, Camille. You just benefited from it. But acknowledging that means something. More than you think." She nodded, her tears drying on her cheeks. "I want to do better. I can't erase the past, but I can change how I show up now. For you. I didn't promise forgiveness, not yet. But I let her words linger between us. For once, she wasn't the shining figure at center stage. She was just my sister sitting across from me in a quiet cafe, trying to bridge a lifetime of distance. We finished our coffee in silence, but it was a different kind of silence, no longer the silence of being unseen, but the silence of two people beginning at last to see each other. The week after that coffee with Camille, life returned to its usual rhythm. Or almost. Work filled my days, emails stacked in tidy rows, meetings slid onto my calendar. Yet in the quiet moments stirring tea, folding laundry, I noticed something different. My phone no longer sat silent. It buzzed. First came a call from Mom. I nearly let it ring out of habit, but curiosity won. Her voice was cautious. Emery, I was looking at your firm's website. That hotel you redesigned, it's beautiful. I paused, unsure whether I had heard her right. Compliments were rare currency in our household, spent almost exclusively on Camille. Thank you, I said finally, my tone even. A day later, Dad called. That car, he said, his voice gruff, it suits you. From him, the words felt like a declaration. Camille, true to her promise, began including me in the family group chat, not in grand gestures, but in subtle corrections. When Mom gushed about her latest recital, Camille added, Emery's project just won an award too, by the way. When Dad asked about Camille's travel schedule, she replied, Ask Emery about her new contract. For the first time, the spotlight shifted ever so slightly, and I felt its warmth. I watched these changes with cautious hope. 30 years of neglect doesn't evaporate overnight. Still small cracks in the dam had appeared, and through them something genuine trickled. One evening, I stopped by my parents' house after a worksite visit in Bellevue. I hadn't warned them. Mom opened the door, surprised but smiling. We were just about to eat, she said, voice warmer than I expected. There's plenty if you'd like to join. At the table, the meal was simple chicken salad bread. Dad asked about my project before he asked about Camille's recital. Mom poured water into my glass without me having to reach for it. Little things, ordinary things, but they lodged in my chest like seeds waiting to root. Camille leaned forward mid-meal. By the way, I told my studio about your hotel redesign. They want you to consult on acoustics for our performance hall. She grinned. Finally, my world and yours get to overlap. I laughed, startled by her enthusiasm. We'll see, I said. But inside I felt something I hadn't in years inclusion. Still, not every attempt landed smoothly. Dad tried asking about my finances, fumbling through questions about retirement accounts and investments. His concern was clumsy, tangled in old habits of criticism. But instead of bristling, I took a breath and said, I've got it covered. The difference was that this time I believed myself. Mom, too, slipped back into her patterns. At one point she began to praise Camille's discipline for practicing 4 hours a day, then caught herself and turned to me. And Emery, your discipline is just as remarkable years of building your career. She stumbled over the words, but I heard the effort. Driving home later that night, I rested my hand on the wheel of my Audi and considered what had shifted. My family hadn't transformed into something new. They were still themselves, awkward, sometimes blind, often late to understanding. But something about my declaration at that dinner and the cake that said, "From me to me," had unsettled the old script. They had begun, however, clumsily to write a different one. I didn't kid myself. Trust would take time. Patterns don't vanish because of one confrontation. Yet, as I crossed Lake Washington, the skyline glowing ahead, I realized something important, whether or not my family fully changed, I already had. The woman who drove this car, who spoke with a steady voice, who no longer waited for recognition, she was here to stay. The small shifts in my parents and sister were welcome, even healing. But the truest shift had already happened in me, and that I thought might be enough. It was a Friday evening when Mom called with an invitation. Her voice carried a hesitation I had rarely heard. "Nothing fancy, just the four of us," she said. "We'd like to have a belated birthday dinner for you." For a moment I almost declined. 30 years of neglect couldn't be undone with one meal, and part of me feared the evening would be another performance. But something in her voice, earnest, almost nervous, softened me. "All right," I said. "I'll come." When I pulled up that night, balloons bobbed on the mailbox, blue and silver, glinting in the porch light. My chest tightened. I wasn't used to gestures like these directed at me. Through the window, I saw Mom peeking out, then waving with a tentative smile. Inside the dining room was dressed in its finest, the good china crystal glasses, fresh flowers at the center. A white box from Macrina Bakery sat waiting. Camille appeared from behind Dad holding a wrapped gift. "Happy belated birthday, Em," she said. For a moment I stood frozen, unable to process the sight. Dad cleared his throat and gestured toward the cake. "Go ahead, open it." With careful fingers, I lifted the lid. Written in elegant blue script, "Happy belated 30th birthday, Emery." Something inside me shifted. The words were late, yes, but they were there. "We know we can't undo the past," Dad said gruffly, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "But your mother and I have been thinking. We haven't been as attentive as we should have been." The understatement hung heavy, but I nodded. "Thank you," I said softly. Camille pressed her gift into my hands. Inside was a sleek black frame holding a professional photo of the hotel lobby I had redesigned. Next to it, a glowing review clipped from Seattle Architecture Monthly. "I thought you might want this for your office," she said, watching my face. I touched the glass. "It's perfect," I whispered, genuinely moved. Dinner was Mom's chicken marsala, my favorite though rarely cooked for me. The conversation was halting but sincere. Dad asked about my current projects, fumbling through architectural terms. Mom listened more than she spoke. Camille filled silences with stories from her studio, but she made sure to circle back to me, drawing me in. At one point, Mom set down her fork and met my eyes. "We wanted to make up for missing your birthday." I set mine down too. "It wasn't just my 30th, I said quietly. It was all of them." The table fell still. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but Mom didn't look away. "You're right," she said. "We've missed a lot. We made you feel second place or no place at all. And I'm sorry." Her words didn't erase the years, but hearing them out loud mattered. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate tonight, but I need you to understand I don't need make-up celebrations or guilt-driven gestures. What I want is respect. Recognition that I exist, that my work and my presence matter." The chandelier cast soft light on their faces as my words sank in. Dad sighed, finally meeting my gaze. "Fair enough," he said. "We've got some catching up to do." Camille lifted her glass. "To new beginnings and better birthdays." I raised mine, studying their faces. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. For the first time in decades, I felt not invisible, but seen, still cautious, still wary, but seen. The cake was rich with buttercream, sweeter than I expected. I tasted it slowly, letting the moment settle. It wasn't everything I had dreamed of, but perhaps it was enough an acknowledgement, a shift, a beginning. As I drove home later that night, balloons still bobbing in the porch light behind me, I realized something important. The real celebration hadn't been the cake or the gift or even the words. It had been me sitting at that table speaking clearly about what I needed. For once, they had listened. The gentle ping of my phone woke me before the alarm. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, half expecting the blank screen of years past. Instead, a message glowed. "Dad, happy birthday, Emery. Hope it's a good one." I sat upright, stunned for a moment at the ordinary sweetness of it. More notifications followed: flowers from Mom, a lunch invitation from Camille, a string of cheerful texts from colleagues. The contrast with my 30th birthday hit me like sunlight after a long storm. I rose showered and slipped on the compass pendant Camille had given me months earlier. In the mirror, I traced its outline against my collarbone and thought of the verse that had carried me through this past year. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. All those birthdays forgotten, all the moments overlooked, they hadn't erased God's plan for me. If anything, they had shaped me into someone who could stand tall when the spotlight never came. Someone who could finally stop waiting for permission to exist. At the office, my team surprised me with a towering chocolate cake. My assistant Ben raised a toast to Emery, whose redesign of the Harborview Hotel just landed us the Westlake Tower contract. The client specifically requested her. Cheers rang out, and for once I didn't shrink. I accepted their applause with quiet joy, letting it wash over me. Later, Camille met me at a waterfront restaurant. She looked different these days, less absorbed, more present. She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver compass pendant, engraved with a simple phrase, "Direction found." "It's for the woman who stopped waiting for others to guide her," she said. Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Camille." We lingered over lunch, the water glinting behind her, our conversation no longer weighted with comparison. She asked about my projects, listened without rushing to speak of her own. For the first time, we shared space as sisters equals. That evening, I drove up to Cary Park once again. The same skyline stretched out before me, but I was not the same woman who had parked here a year earlier with a lonely cupcake and a desperate hope for acknowledgement. I was steadier now, anchored by lessons I'd fought hard to learn. I thought about revenge, the quiet kind, not the loud explosions of anger, but the steady reclamation of dignity. That was my true revenge story. Not a slammed door, not a shouted word, but a calm declaration I am worth remembering, whether you remember me or not. In that sense, my story belongs among all the true revenge stories of people who choose healing over bitterness, self-worth over neglect. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's growth. It's peace. It's stepping into the future God already planned for you. I looked down at my phone at the steady scroll of birthday wishes at the family dinner planned for Saturday. Better late than never, the old saying goes. And though the years behind me were filled with absence, the years ahead held possibility. I whispered another verse that had taken root in my heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:39. For so long, I had waited for my family to love me as they loved Camille. But the turning point came when I learned to love myself, not with arrogance, but with the quiet self-respect that is the cornerstone of all virtue. When I drove home, the Audi purred beneath my hands, still carrying the scent of leather after a year. It was more than a car. It was the moment I decided never again to wait in silence, never again to measure my worth by someone else's memory. At my apartment, I opened a package waiting by the door. Camille's handwriting covered the label. Inside was a scrapbook. She had made pages of photos and clippings of milestones I thought no one had noticed. My college graduation. My first design award. The article about the Harborview Hotel. Tucked in the back, a photograph of me standing proudly beside my Audi on the night I bought it. A note fell out, handwritten in her neat script. I see you now. I'm sorry it took so long. I sat at my desk, touched the pages, and let the tears come. Not tears of longing this time, but of recognition. I was no longer invisible. Even if the acknowledgement came late, it came. Before bed, I wrote a message to myself in my journal. Your worth was never lost. It was always there, waiting for you to claim it. And to those who might hear my story someday, I would say this: if you've ever been forgotten, if your milestones have passed unnoticed, don't wait forever for others to see you. Light your own candle, buy your own cake, drive your own dream. Because self-worth doesn't need permission. It needs courage. So let me turn to you, dear listener, dear viewer. Have you ever had to celebrate yourself because no one else remembered? Have you ever found strength in silence or discovered that your truest revenge was simply choosing to thrive? Share your thoughts. Share your own true revenge stories in the comments, because each story reminds us we are not alone. And if my journey resonates with you, support this channel with a comment, a subscribe. Your voice helps these stories reach someone who might be sitting in the dark tonight, waiting to hear that they matter too. For 30 years, my family forgot my birthday. But God never forgot me. And in the end, that was enough to guide me toward the life I was always meant to claim. Thank you for listening to this story. If you've ever felt forgotten, remember your worth has never depended on anyone else. Share your own true revenge stories down in the comments, because your voice might give strength to someone who needs it tonight. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Together, we can build a community where no one ever feels invisible again.